All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our last of our fall webinar series. I'm Lauren Seville, the Roots and Shoots manager at the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada, and I'm super happy to have you all here joining us for our last webinar for our fall webinar series. I can't believe it's at the end. We definitely hope to continue these throughout the rest of the year, so stay tuned for more information about that. So today we're going to be talking about the wild world of chimpanzees. So I thought we would end on a fun, engaging, and educational program so you all could learn a little bit more about the animals that Jane so dearly loves and has studied, and all of the kind of information she has allowed us to know about chimps. We'll talk a little bit about that, as well as just some general knowledge we know about chimpanzees now and how you can help chimpanzees in their plight as they are an endangered species. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll get started. So chimpanzees are part of the great ape family. So they are large, they live in Africa and Asia, they have no tails, so that's what separates apes from other animals like monkeys or lemurs in the primate family. There are 5 different kinds of apes. We have orangutans, bonobos, gorillas, us as humans, and chimpanzees. So we as humans are in that family as well, which is pretty cool. And so we have orangutans that live in Asia and in Indonesia and Borneo. And then we have gorillas, bonobos, and chimps living in Africa. And obviously humans, we live all over the world now, but we did evolve in Africa as well. Apes also have large brains. We know this. Obviously, we have big brains for our body size, but we also see this same trait in other apes. They have a longer lifespan, 40 to 50 years in the wild and up to 60 years in captivity. Just found out that one of the matriarch gorilla actually at the Toronto Zoo just passed away today, and I believe she was 49 years old. So they do really have quite long lifespans compared, similar to us. They also have long arms, so this allows them to what we call knuckle walk. So they actually walk on their knuckles when they're walking on the ground on all fours, versus on palms, which is what we would see in, say, a monkey or a lemur. And obviously, as humans, we walk on 2 legs, but that is a unique adaptation that we solely have compared to the other ape species. So chimpanzees are distributed across kind of the middle of Africa. So you can imagine a little bit above and a little bit below the equator, which runs kind of through Kenya. So we have chimps in Western to Eastern Africa, through Central Africa, in a variety of countries like Senegal, the Ivory Coast, the DRC, Rwanda, Tanzania, and many other countries. And they live in a variety of mixed habitats, all the way from tropical forests to mixed woodland savannas. So typically those mixed woodland savannas tend to be more on the west coast, and then the tropical rainforest more in Central and Eastern Africa. They're also very large. So chimpanzees are quite big. If anyone has gotten the chance to see them either in person at a zoo or in the wild, you'll know that they are quite large. I was lucky enough to visit with a wild troop in Rwanda when I was there visiting for travel, and it was pretty amazing to see them in person. They were quite nervous as they weren't super used to people. It was in a very kind of remote forest in Rwanda. So not like the gorillas. When you go visit the mountain gorillas, they have been around people for many years and they don't really care that you're there. The chimps were definitely a little bit on edge, but I remember we could hear them calling, and we kind of run up this little hill, and all of a sudden we see this male just sitting on this path hanging out, and he all of a sudden sees us and freaks out and runs away. But it was so cool to see them in person in the wild. And we could hear their pant hoots. So these are actually the calls they use, and it's something that Jane does whenever she introduces herself at her talks. And it's a way that they introduce themselves, that they can kind of indicate that this is their territory. And I don't think I could do it justice like Jane, but I'll try a little bit. So the pant hoot kind of sounds like this. So it's just a loud call, and that's kind of how they say hello. So they live in large social groups. So you see them together in large groups of multi-male, multi-female groups. And they live in what we call a fission fusion society, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. They are male dominant. So the males are the ones kind of in charge, leading the group. There's always an alpha male that's kind of the one in charge of the group. They're very smart. We're going to talk about all the ways that they're super smart, from tool use to culture. And they tend to eat mostly fruit. So we call them frugivores. And then they supplement that fruit diet in the lean season with nuts, leaves, and they also do sometimes hunt other monkeys, usually red colobus, Diana monkeys, some of the smaller forest monkeys that will live in the same areas that they do. So in terms of tool use, we know that chimpanzees use a wide variety of tools, and Jane was actually the first one to discover this behavior trait in Gombe when she saw that chimpanzees were using sticks to fish for termites. So there would be a termite mound. They would take a stick, take all the leaves off, and they'd stick that stick in the mound, pull it out, and eat all of the termites that come off that stick. And this was a behavior that no one had seen before, and it was something that we didn't know that they used tools. We thought at that time that we were the only tool users. So it really changed our relationship to chimpanzees, and to see that we are a lot more similar than we originally thought. And now we know that all chimpanzee populations use tools to some degree. Different tool use they use different tools in different communities, and we'll talk about why that is. But we also know that other animals use tools now too. Capuchin monkeys use tools. They use nuts to crack open rocks. We know that crows use tools, and many other animals use tools as well. So we're definitely not the only ones. So we also see nutcracking behavior, which you can see here demonstrated in the photo here. This is in Western Africa. They're using a rock to crack open a nut. And you have different populations using different tools. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So chimpanzees live in what we call a fission fusion society. So basically what you have is you have the core group of all the individuals that make up that group. But every day, smaller kind of subgroups of that larger group will go off into foraging parties, break off from the main group, go off and forage for the day, and then they'll come back together in the later in the day for social activities like grooming, playing with the infants. So you tend to have solitary females will go off and forage on their own with their infants if they have, or their offspring, and then males will kind of go and spread out and kind of visit the females throughout the day. And each female kind of basically has her own little home range with her offspring that she'll go and visit. So female-female relationships in chimpanzees are generally pretty what we call weak. So they're not super strong. They're not very strongly bonded because most females will disperse when they become sexually mature. So they're going into a group where they don't have any other chimpanzees that they know really. So they don't tend to have those really strong bonds of female bonds that we see in, say, a group like baboons. So baboons live in what we call a matrifocal society. All of the females who are born in that group live in that group for their lives, so they have really close bonds. Chimpanzees are the opposite. It's the males that stay in the groups that they're born into, and then the females leave. And they have maybe a small dominance hierarchy, but it's not as aggressive. It's not as intense as the male dominance hierarchy that we see. There is some aggression amongst females. Jane did find there was 2 chimps in her groups at Gombe, Palm and Passion, who actually killed other females' infants. And this was very rare behavior, but it can show that females can get quite aggressive with each other, but not very often. So for male-male relationships, they are bonded. So they have quite close bonds. You can see these two males are grooming in the photo, and they have large territories that encompass many female home ranges. So kind of the males, it's their big territory, and then the females have their little areas that they go to. They have these strong social bonds, and they maintain these through grooming. Again, this is kind of that social currency that primates use. All primates groom each other that live in social groups. Just like we hug each other, we call each other on the phone. That's the ways that we bond socially. Chimpanzees and other primates groom each other. And they do have quite a strict dominance hierarchy. They will fight to become the alpha male. The alpha male has the greatest access to females, greatest access to resources, and those fights can become quite aggressive, especially if the alpha male who's in power at the moment doesn't want to give up that status, which normally they don't unless they're getting quite old. It's usually quite an aggressive fight that happens to get that changeover in leadership. And yes, Manuel, thank you for your comment there. This will be up this will be up recorded on our Facebook page after the live stream is done. So you come back to our Facebook page anytime and watch it. So then we have male and female relationships. So this is what's called polygynandry. So it's basically every male and every female, they all mate with each other. So males and females all have multiple partners that they mate with. And this is done because females display when they are ready to mate, when they're ready to conceive. So a lot of times you'll see monkeys and apes with these big red swollen bums, and that indicates to males that they are ready to mate. So within that time frame when she's swollen, she will mate with all of the males in the group. And that's because she is wanting to make sure that all the males think that they have a chance to become the father of her offspring. So then they are not going to kill that offspring when it is born. So this is what we call infanticide protection, or basically making sure that her offspring is safe from any male wanting to kill it to make her go into ovulation again. This is something that we do see in some primate species where it's one male and multiple females, and males will come in, take over that whole group of females. And if there's any females with nursing offspring so that they're still breastfeeding, they will tend to kill them, because if females are breastfeeding, they cannot get pregnant. With most wild mammals, breastfeeding inhibits ovulation because it's too energetically taxing on their body to do both at the same time. We as humans in kind of more Western societies don't have that issue. We can get pregnant while we are breastfeeding as well. But most mammals can't, just because it's too much work to do both at the same time. It takes a lot of calories to grow a baby and even more to feed a baby. So with this kind of multiple male, multiple female mating, this is a way that females protect themselves from their offspring being killed. But she does have a way to kind of get her preference across as to which male she actually wants to father her offspring. And she does this because there's a period in the time when she is swollen and when she is fertile, that she is the most fertile, that it's most likely that that male is going to fertilize her egg. So this is called the pre-ovulatory period, or POP. And so she will preferentially mate with the males that she wants to actually father her offspring during that time period, and then mate with all the males during the rest. So she actually can kind of get her preference of who she wants to be the father of her child through this kind of sneaky way, because even though the males don't know when that period is, she internally does, and she will mate with those males preferentially in that time period, which is pretty cool. So in terms of intergroup relationships, chimpanzees are very territorial. They actively defend their territory. You can see this group of chimps are going out on a patrol. They will basically go around their territorial border and patrol it to make sure there's no chimps from other groups coming into their territory. So they will both, male and female, use pant hoop calls to keep contact and advertise kind of, this is my territory. If you're not in our troop, you can't come in. Chimps males can get very aggressive when they find other males in their territory, and it can be lethal for that chimp who's coming in. Females are less of an issue because they do come in from other groups, but if males find another male in their territory, it's likely to lead to a quite aggressive attack. And in Gombe, Jane did discover a type of warfare, she described it as, where one of the chimp troops at Gombe started going into the other chimp's territory on basically trying to take over their territory. And these large group of males would come in to the other chimp's territory and start killing off the males in that territory and basically taking the females for their own. So, and over, I'm not sure exactly how long it was, I think at least a year or so, that one group was able to take over quite a bit of the other group's territory along with its females and killed off quite a number of its males. It was quite an intense year or so. And it definitely shows that chimps have an aggressive side just like we do as humans. So there's 3 chimpanzee subspecies. We have the Western chimpanzees that live in kind of the Ivory Coast, Senegal, Guinea, the western part of Africa. You can see with the arrows here. We have central chimpanzees, so these tend to be less studied. These are found in Gabon, Cameroon, Republic of Congo, kind of in the middle of Africa. And then we have the eastern chimpanzees that live in Gombe, in Uganda, Rwanda, and there's 2 sites, Gombe and Mahale, that are where we find some of the most studied chimpanzees. So within chimpanzees, we see quite a lot of population differences, and each chimp population basically has its own set of cultural traditions. So just like human groups have their own cultural traditions, chimpanzee groups do have their own as well. And some of these are related to tool use, but some of these are behavior related. So an example of this is this grooming clasp. So the chimps in Mahale in Uganda will basically put their hands up like this, and they'll grasp each other's hands like this when they're grooming, and then groom each other. And there's no real reason to be doing this. There's no way it makes grooming easier or better. It's just what they started doing. And we see this as cultural transmission. So it's something that that group does that no other group does. And it's these cultural differences. And it might just happen one time a chimp does this, other chimps like it. Mothers pass this on to their offspring, and it spreads throughout the group. And this is something that we see not only in chimpanzees, but in other monkeys as well. So there is a research site in Japan that studies Japanese macaques, and the researchers started supplementing the macaques' diet. So they would come down to the beach where I guess they were easier to study, and they would give them sweet potatoes. And so one day a female goes and takes a sweet potato that's in the sand on the beach and goes and washes it in the ocean. And now, this whole population of Japanese macaques washes their sweet potatoes. And maybe she washed it to get off the sand. Maybe she washed it and put it in the water and it tasted better because of the salt in the ocean water. Who knows why she did it, but it's now something that this troop of macaques does that we don't see in other macaque groups. So you can see this is an example of cultural transmission, which is, I think, pretty cool. So another example of cultural transmission is through different types of tool use. So at the Thai Chimpanzee Research Center in Ivory Coast, we see that chimpanzees crack open nuts with a stone or wood hammer and anvil. So this is a fairly complex behavior because they have to take a rock or a piece of wood that's big enough, that's stable enough to act as that anvil to place the nut on. They then have to get a rock that is strong enough to crack open the nut, but not too big to just smash that nut to pieces. And they have to apply enough pressure on the nut. They have to use the correct type of nuts that will break under this type of pressure to make this whole system work. So it is quite a complex tool use strategy. And it takes up quite a lot of time to do for obviously a resource that's high in fat and high in protein, which can be super helpful during the dry season when there's not necessarily a lot of fruit available. But we don't see this type of nut cracking in Eastern or Central chimpanzees. So why could that be? Well, it could be because that they don't have nuts and rocks and wood in those forests. But that's not the case. They have all of these tools and equipment basically in these other forests where these other chimpanzee populations live, but they just don't use those tools. And it's most likely that it is a cultural difference. So chimpanzees and Thai figured out way to get to this food resource and started using this tool set, whereas chimpanzees in Gombe, they'll fish for termites instead. They might not necessarily do nutcracking, but it's not because it's not available to them. It just hasn't kind of started in that chimpanzee group and been passed on through the generations, which I think is pretty cool to see our kind of closest relatives, the chimpanzee, that they do something and that they have these cultural differences just like we do. So at Gombe, there's also a huge repertoire of different cultural behaviors. So research has actually been ongoing at Gombe for 60 years. This year is the 60th anniversary of research at Gombe, which is so amazing. It's the longest occurring research that's happened at the same site in history, which is amazing for animal research. And they found 40 different behavioral patterns that indicate culture that are unique to the Gombe chimpanzees. So these are behaviors like specific nest building, specific ways to groom, rain dances, courtship rituals. So some of these are found to be customary in these communities while absent in others, which is pretty neat. So unfortunately, chimpanzees, though, are under quite a lot of threats from humans that are causing them to be endangered. So chimpanzees are unfortunately endangered, and they are quite at risk of going extinct if we don't continue to work to save and support them. So the two biggest things that are threats to chimpanzees are deforestation. So this is the biggest threat to all animal wildlife across the world, is us as humans going in and taking away their forest or environmental homes for our own use. Usually this is for either agriculture, it's either planting crops, or it's for grazing for animals like cows, and also for cutting down trees for firewood or charcoal, for mining. There's many ways and reasons why forests get destroyed, but it's all due to human development or usage. And then the second threat is bushmeat hunting and the illegal pet trade. So unfortunately, people do hunt chimpanzees for meat, and then they will hunt the adults for meat and kill them, and then they'll take the babies and sell them for the illegal pet trade. So it's not a great cycle. Chimpanzees are very protective of their infants, and unfortunately do get killed in these instances. So their infants can be sold in the illegal pet trade. But you can do many things to help chimpanzees. So one of the big things is to help combat the illegal pet trade is don't share posts on social media of chimpanzees dressed up like people or in what looks like a pet or a home situation, because we don't want people to think that keeping chimpanzees as pets is something that's normal, is something that's good, because it's not. They're wild animals. They deserve to be out in the wild with their group, with chimpanzees, not kept at home in homes with people being dressed up. They are also very strong. As soon as that chimpanzee goes from being a baby to an adolescent, they are very difficult to handle. There's been multiple instances of chimpanzees attacking their owners or people their owners know in very horrific ways. And we want to make sure that we keep us safe, but we also want to make sure that we keep the chimpanzees safe and not take them in a pet type situation. Another thing you can do is recycle your cell phone or delay getting a new one. So you might not know, but the minerals that make up the electronics in your cell phone, many of them come from Central African countries where chimpanzees live, like the DRC or the Republic of Congo. And those minerals have to be mined, and usually they're mined in relatively unsustainable ways, and are destroying the forest habitat. So when you recycle your cell phone, you're making sure that those minerals are then put back into the cell phone development economy, so they can be used again. And if you delay getting a new cell phone, instead of getting a new cell phone every year or every 2 years, keep it until it's no longer useful, and then purchase a new one and recycle your old one. So you can learn more about that. We have a new campaign starting in very shortly in the next week or so called The Forest is Calling, where you can learn all about recycling your cell phone, take a pledge to recycle your cell phone. So keep an eye on that. That will be on our website. So you can find that at janegoodall.ca. And also learn more about chimpanzees on our website as well. You can learn all about their behaviors, what's happening at Gombe, what's happening at our different sanctuaries that we support as well. And another way, and especially around now with Christmas time and Christmas gifts, and obviously a lot of virtual Christmas shopping happening these days, is also check out on our website. You can become a Gombe Science Hero. So you can get a super cool package of all the cool science and updates that are happening at Gombe and get updates frequently throughout the year. Or you can become a chimp guardian and adopt a orphan chimpanzee that's at the sanctuaries that we support in Africa, and that can also help to support the work that we do. So there's many ways that you can help chimps from your home here in Canada, and to help chimpanzees kind of what feels like a world away in Africa. So that's kind of all I have to say. So I'd love if there were any questions. I'm happy to answer questions for anyone. You can just pop them in the chat box if you have any. or you can contact me as well, Lauren@janegoodall.ca, with any questions you might have, how to get involved, how to help chimpanzees, or any more information you might have about that you want to know about chimps. So we'll just wait and see if any questions come through. I don't see any. So I just wanted to say thank you for all of you that have tuned in over the past 9 sessions that we've held for our webinars this fall. It's been so great to connect with people all over Canada and the world on these topics, and I hope that you've learned some things new, would hopefully join us as we continue these in the rest of the year. So stay tuned for updates on that on our website. Again, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, we'll also be keeping you in touch there, and you can do that at janegoodall.ca. So I'm going to say bye. Hope you all have a lovely holiday season, and thank you again for joining us as we have learned about all these topics over the past few weeks. Bye.